Clara had always believed that silence spoke louder than words. But she never imagined silence could feel this heavy. It was a Tuesday morning when she realized Daniel hadn't sent his usual good morning text. At first, she brushed it off, telling herself he was probably busy, maybe running late for work, maybe caught up in one of those endless meetings he often complained about. But as the hours ticked by and her phone screen stayed blank, worry began to curl its way into her chest. By noon, she checked her phone more times than she cared to admit, refreshing her inbox, scrolling through their last conversation, replaying his voice notes in her head. The night before, everything had felt so normal, so warm. They had talked about simple things, the new cafe he wanted to try, the way autumn leaves were finally falling in shades of gold and red. He had laughed at something, she said. A laugh so genuine it lingered in her ears long after the call ended. There had been no sign of distance, no shadow of goodbye. Clara worked as a graphic designer in a small studio downtown. The office was quiet that day, with only the soft hum of printers and the clicking of keyboards breaking the silence. She stared at her screen, the bright colors of her project blurring before her eyes. Every time her phone buzzed with a notification, her heart jumped, only to crash seconds later when it wasn't his name lighting up her screen. By evening, unease had become a storm inside her. She remembered the way Daniel had once said, "You'll never have to doubt me." Clara. His words had felt like a promise carved into stone. Now, as she sat on the edge of her bed staring at her silent phone, she wondered if promises could vanish as quickly as people. That night, she couldn't sleep. The ticking clock beside her bed felt louder with every passing second. She tossed and turned, replaying every moment of their last meeting. They had gone for a walk by the river, the city lights reflecting on the water. His hand had brushed against hers, not quite holding, but close enough to make her heart flutter. He had smiled at her, a quiet smile that felt like it carried 100 unspoken words. She had gone to bed that night believing she was stepping into something beautiful. Now, she wasn't so sure. By Wednesday morning, her worry had grown into frustration. She scrolled through their chat again, looking for signs she might have missed. Did she say something wrong? Did she laugh at the wrong time? Did she imagine the closeness between them? The questions stabbed at her mind until she could barely focus on anything else. At work, she spilled coffee on her desk because her hands were trembling. Her colleague Anna asked if she was okay. Clara forced a smile and said she was just tired. But inside, her chest felt hollow. Her mind kept drifting back to him, to the empty space where his voice should have been. That afternoon, she walked to the park near her office, the place where she and Daniel had first met. It had been a sunny afternoon in late spring. She was sketching in her notebook when a gust of wind tore the page away. Daniel had caught it just before it flew into the pond. He had handed it back with a grin, and somehow, that moment had bloomed into countless conversations, quiet walks, and laughter that lingered long after the night ended. Standing there now, with leaves scattering at her feet, Clara felt the sting of absence like never before. Thursday brought no message either. Her phone stayed silent, each hour stretching endlessly. Clara tried to distract herself with work, music, even cleaning her apartment, but everything reminded her of him. The chair where he had once sat, the mug he had left behind, the playlist they had listened to together. Every detail was a reminder that he wasn't here. She thought about calling him, but her fingers froze every time she opened his contact. What if he didn't answer? What if he had chosen to walk away? The fear of rejection was heavier than the silence itself, so she waited, hoping he would break it first. On Friday night, Clara's friends invited her out for dinner. They laughed, shared stories, clinked glasses. But Clara couldn't escape the ache in her chest. Every time her phone buzzed, her heart leapt. only to fall again when it wasn't him. She smiled when her friends looked at her, but her eyes kept drifting to the door, half expecting him to walk in, half hoping she would see his familiar face. That night, when she finally returned home, she sat on her balcony and looked at the city lights. The world seemed alive, buzzing, moving forward, yet she felt stuck, suspended in the silence he had left behind. Her mind whispered questions she didn't want to face. Was he hurt? Was he gone for good? Or was she just another passing chapter in his life? Saturday morning came with cold rain tapping against her window. Clara wrapped herself in a blanket and tried to read a book, but her eyes couldn't follow the words. She kept remembering the sound of his voice, the way he had once said her name like it was something fragile. Now she wondered if he ever thought of her at all. By the afternoon, frustration boiled over. She wrote him a short message, just 3 words. "Are you okay?" Her thumb hovered over the send button for what felt like hours, but she couldn't press it. The fear of silence in response was too much to bear. She closed her phone and set it aside. Burying her face in her hands, Sunday was worse. The weekend stretched endlessly, and her mind refused to stay quiet. She went for a walk, hoping the crisp autumn air would calm her. The trees were golden, the sidewalks covered in leaves. Couples strolled hand in hand, laughter echoing through the park. Clara felt like she was watching the world from the outside. A world where love bloomed for others while she carried only silence. That evening, she sat by her window with a notebook. She wrote down everything she wanted to tell him, how the silence was breaking her, how she missed his voice, how she felt both angry and worried at the same time. The words spilled out of her, pages filling quickly, yet she never sent them. They remained locked in the notebook, secrets of a heart caught between longing and fear. By Monday, a full week had passed without him. Clara woke up with heavy eyes and a heavier heart. She told herself to stop waiting, to let go, but every sound, every shadow, every phone vibration made her hope again. The silence had become more than an absence. It had become a question without an answer, a wound without healing. And yet, even in that emptiness, a small part of her still held on, still whispered that maybe tomorrow would be different. Maybe tomorrow he would come back. Maybe tomorrow her phone would light up with his name. Until then, she waited, trapped in the sudden silence he had left behind, not knowing that this silence was only the beginning of a story that would change her heart forever. The days after Daniel's disappearance stretched like an endless hallway for Clara. Each morning she woke with a small flicker of hope, only to see her phone blank again. The absence of his name on the screen felt heavier with each sunrise. What once was routine, his good morning messages, his quick jokes to brighten her day, was now gone, leaving only silence. By Tuesday, Clara started writing small notes to herself, not because she wanted to, but because her mind needed a place to release what she couldn't say to him. She filled scraps of paper with thoughts like, "I miss your voice," or "Why did you leave without a word?" She tucked them into a jar on her nightstand, a silent conversation only she could read. At work, she threw herself into projects, trying to drown her thoughts in colors, lines, and designs. But no matter how busy she kept herself, her mind circled back to him. She remembered the way Daniel used to drop by her office with coffee, the way he teased her for always ordering the same flavor. Now, every coffee cup felt like a reminder. Every cafe corner whispered his name. Wednesday came, and Clara forced herself to meet a deadline. Her colleagues praised her work, but she felt no joy. The only reward she longed for was a message that never arrived. At lunch, she sat with Anna, who noticed her distant stare. "Still no word?" Anna asked gently. Clara shook her head, pretending she was fine. But Anna's worried look told her she wasn't fooling anyone. That evening, Clara walked through the park again. The benches were wet from rain, the trees glowing with autumn colors. She sat where they had once shared ice cream, laughing like children, and wondered if he remembered that moment at all. She stayed there until the air grew cold, then walked home with her chest aching. On Thursday, doubt began to creep in. It whispered cruel questions into her mind. Maybe he never cared. Maybe he had moved on. Maybe she was only imagining the connection they had. Clara hated those thoughts, but they pressed harder with every hour of silence. She wished she could turn them off, but instead, she replayed old conversations to remind herself he had been real, that their bond had been true. Friday was supposed to feel lighter, but it didn't. Her friends invited her to a movie night, and she agreed, hoping the distraction would help. She laughed at the film, ate popcorn, joined their chatter. But in the quiet moments between scenes, her heart ached. Her phone sat in her pocket, untouched, but she couldn't stop checking it. Every vibration, every light made her pulse quicken, but each time, disappointment cut deeper. That night, Clara returned home and stood by her balcony, the city alive beneath her. People filled the streets, voices rising, cars passing, yet she felt utterly alone. She whispered his name into the air, as if the night might carry it to him. Her eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall. Saturday morning, she woke early, the sunlight sharp against her face. She made breakfast but couldn't eat. Every bite tasted hollow without him. She sat at the table staring at her untouched plate, then pushed it away. Her phone buzzed suddenly, her heart leaping, but it was only a bank notification. She laughed bitterly, shaking her head at the cruel trick of hope. In the afternoon, Clara went to the bookstore where they had once spent hours browsing. Daniel had always teased her for reading the endings of books first. "You ruin the story for yourself," he had said. Smiling now, she walked through the aisles alone, running her hand across the spines of books, imagining him beside her. She bought a novel she knew he would have loved, but the joy of sharing it was missing. On Sunday, she decided to visit her parents. They noticed her quiet mood but didn't press her. Her mother served warm soup. Her father told stories about his garden. Clara listened, smiled faintly, but her heart was far away. The comfort of home didn't erase the longing she carried. On the drive back, she cried quietly, the kind of tears that slipped out without warning. By Monday, a full 2 weeks had passed. Clara's heart had settled into a strange rhythm. Half of her wanted to let go, to stop checking her phone, stop waiting. The other half clung desperately to every memory, replaying them like treasured scenes from a favorite film. She remembered the way Daniel once leaned across the table in a cafe and said, "Being with you feels like home." How could someone who said that disappear so easily? At work, she forced herself to focus, but every time the office door opened, she turned instinctively, hoping it would be him. By evening, she was exhausted from pretending. She went home and sat by her window. Notebook in hand, she began to write a letter, pouring everything out. "I don't know why you're gone, but it feels like a part of me is missing. I don't know if I should be angry or patient. I just wish you would tell me the truth." When she finished, she folded the letter and tucked it into the same jar as her notes. Tuesday brought a sharp loneliness. Clara noticed how couples filled the streets, holding hands, sharing coffees, laughing. It made her ache for something she wasn't sure she still had. She walked through the park again, her steps heavy, the world around her blurred by her own thoughts. She sat on their bench, closed her eyes, and imagined him sitting beside her. She could almost hear his voice, almost feel the warmth of his hand. but when she opened her eyes, there was only emptiness. By Wednesday, the silence had transformed into something darker. Clara wasn't just waiting anymore. She was questioning herself. What if she wasn't enough? What if she was too much? What if he had realized she wasn't the person he wanted after all? She hated the doubts, but they clung to her like shadows. She buried herself in work, refusing to let the tears fall in front of anyone. Thursday evening, Clara went for a walk downtown. The streets were alive with lights, music spilling from restaurants, people laughing. She watched strangers pass by, wondering if Daniel was somewhere out there, laughing too, living as if she had never mattered. The thought cut deep, and she hurried home. Friday night, Clara's friends insisted she join them at a small gathering. She smiled, she talked. She even danced a little, but the whole time, her eyes drifted to her phone, waiting for a message that never came. Her heart felt torn, wanting to live, to laugh, to move forward, but chained to a silence she couldn't escape. Saturday morning, she decided to try something different. She cleaned her apartment, rearranged furniture, opened the windows wide to let fresh air in. For a few hours, she felt lighter, as if maybe she could build a life without him. But then, in the middle of folding laundry, she found his jacket still hanging in her closet. The familiar scent clung to the fabric, and suddenly the strength she had built all morning crumbled. She sat on the floor holding it, tears falling freely now. Sunday evening, as the sky turned orange and the city quieted, Clara returned to her balcony. She looked at the skyline, remembering how Daniel had once said, "The city feels smaller when you're here with me." She closed her eyes, clutching her notebook, and whispered, "Then why did you leave me alone in it?" The days kept passing, one after another. Each one carried a new wave of longing, confusion, and doubt. Each one added another page to the notebook, another note to the jar. Clara lived them all, waiting, hoping, wondering, trapped between holding on and letting go. And though her heart was heavy, a small flame of hope still burned quietly inside her, whispering that silence might not last forever, whispering that one day the emptiness could break with the sound of his voice. Clara never thought a single piece of paper could change her heartbeat. But when she found the note slipped under her door, her world tilted. It was late evening, the city buzzing outside, the hum of cars blending with the sound of neighbors chatting in the hallway. She had been curled up with her notebook, writing yet another page of unsent words, when she saw it. A folded sheet, plain, almost shy, resting against the doormat. Her breath caught as she picked it up. Her fingers trembling, she unfolded it carefully, her eyes racing across the handwriting she knew too well. Daniel's handwriting slanted, hurried, alive with his presence. The words were simple, yet they shook her to her core. "I'm sorry I disappeared. I've been lost, but I think of you every day." Clara read the note again and again, each time her emotions colliding: relief, anger, hope, confusion. Her pulse quickened, her chest tightening. She had begged the universe for a sign, and here it was, small and fragile, but real, still. Questions burned through her. Why had he vanished? Why write instead of call? Why now? That night she barely slept. Her mind replayed memories like flickering scenes on a screen: his laughter in the cafe, his hand brushing hers by the river, the way he once leaned closer, as if the world disappeared when he looked at her. The silence had carved deep wounds, but the note stitched something back together, just enough to make her hope again. The next morning, Clara stood in front of the mirror. Staring at her reflection, she looked tired, but there was a spark in her eyes she hadn't seen in weeks. She decided she couldn't wait any longer. If he had reached out, even in such a fragile way, she needed to face him. She needed answers. She thought of all the places that tied them together. The cafe where they met, the park bench, the bookstore, the riverwalk. And then her heart told her exactly where to go, the little cafe on Maple Street. The place he had called theirs, without ever saying the word. When she pushed open the cafe door later that afternoon, the smell of roasted coffee and cinnamon wrapped around her. The room buzzed with chatter, soft music playing in the background. Her eyes scanned the crowd, and then she saw him. Daniel sat in the corner, leaning forward, his hands clasped tightly, as if holding himself together. His eyes flicked up, searching, and when they found hers, time seemed to falter. Clara froze, her breath catching, the weeks of silence, the nights of longing, the heavy doubts, all of it collided in that single moment. She walked toward him, each step heavy, her heart hammering. He stood when she reached the table, a small, uncertain smile tugging at his lips. For a moment they just looked at each other, neither speaking, the air thick with everything unsaid. "Clara," he said finally, his voice low, carrying both relief and regret. She didn't answer right away. Her eyes scanned his face, memorizing every line, every tired shadow. She wanted to be angry, to demand an explanation, but seeing him in front of her made her chest ache with something softer. They sat down, silence stretching like a fragile thread. Daniel's hands trembled slightly as he held his cup. "I know I hurt you," he said. "I didn't mean to vanish, I wasn't okay." Clara's brows furrowed, her voice steady though her heart was racing. "Then why didn't you tell me? Why leave me in silence?" His eyes lowered, shame flickering across his features. "I thought I could handle things on my own. I didn't want to pull you into my mess." And then the days kept passing, and it got harder to explain. "But you were in my mind, every single day, Clara." That never stopped. Her chest tightened, his words both soothing and cutting. She had waited so long to hear his voice, but she hadn't expected it to come wrapped in brokenness. She wanted to trust him, but part of her hesitated. "Do you know what it felt like?" she whispered. "Every day wondering if I mattered to you. If I had imagined everything." His hand moved across the table, pausing just short of hers. His voice cracked. "You mattered, you still do. I'm sorry for the silence. I don't expect forgiveness right away. I just need you to know I never forgot you." Not for a second. Tears pricked Clara's eyes, but she blinked them back. She studied him, the sincerity in his gaze, the vulnerability he couldn't quite hide. This wasn't the Daniel who had laughed so easily weeks ago. This was someone who had fought battles she couldn't see, and maybe was still fighting. For a long moment, neither spoke. The cafe noise blurred into the background. For Clara, it felt like the world had narrowed down to just the two of them. The fragile bridge between heartbreak and hope. Finally, she drew a breath. "If we're going to try again, it has to be different. No disappearing, no silence. I need honesty. Even if it's messy." Daniel nodded quickly, his eyes shining with something close to relief. "I promise, no more silence. If I'm lost, I'll tell you. If I'm scared, I'll tell you. I don't want to lose you again." Her heart softened at his words, but she held herself steady. Hope was fragile, and she had learned how silence could shatter it. Still, sitting there with him, she realized her longing hadn't been for nothing. The love she felt hadn't faded, it had only been waiting, hidden beneath the weight of unanswered questions. They sat for hours, talking, untangling the knots silence had tied between them. Daniel explained his struggles, how life had overwhelmed him, How fear made him retreat. Clara listened. Torn between sorrow and compassion, she shared her side too. How the silence had almost broken her. How each day without him had been a battle. As the sky outside turned dusky and the cafe lights glowed warmer, Daniel finally reached across the table, his hand finding hers. This time Clara let him. The touch was simple, but it carried the weight of weeks apart. It felt like a promise, tentative but real. When they left the cafe, the evening air was cool. Clara walked beside him, their steps quiet. He glanced at her. His eyes filled with something she hadn't seen before, not just affection, but humility, a deep awareness of what he had almost lost. At the corner where they usually parted, Daniel paused. "Can I walk you home?" he asked softly. Clara hesitated for a moment, then nodded, as they walked. She realized the city didn't feel so heavy anymore. The silence hadn't erased their connection. It had only tested it, and those scars remained. Something new was forming a fragile hope. Delicate but alive. When they reached her building, they stood in the glow of the streetlight. Daniel looked at her, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Thank you for meeting me. I don't deserve it. But I'm going to try to, Clara. Every day from now on." She searched his face. The truth in his words. And for the first time in weeks, she allowed herself a real smile. "Then don't disappear again," she whispered. He nodded, his eyes locked on hers. Never. They didn't need more words. The embrace that followed was quiet, gentle, filled with all the emotions neither could fully express. The city moved around them, people passing, lights flickering. But for Clara, time stilled. In that moment, she realized something important. Love wasn't always about perfection or easy promises. Sometimes it was about scars. About choosing to rebuild even after everything cracked. The silence had tested her, but it had also shown her strength. And now, with Daniel back, she carried a fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, love was worth the risk. As she stepped inside her apartment later, her heart felt lighter than it had in weeks. The silence was gone, replaced by the sound of possibility. Clara knew the journey ahead wouldn't be simple, but for the first time in a long time, she believed in tomorrow. She believed in love's return. Delicate yet powerful, fragile yet unbreakable.